もうすぐ岩までの最短ルートだ。今見える限りでは巨人はいない。
Hey, what's happening everyone? I am SirJames from Gamerfuzion.com, and today I'm here to provide you with my review for Attack on Titan on the PlayStation 4. Do keep in mind that this review may or may not contain any spoilers, and pretty much the best way I could describe the game's storyline is that if you've seen the anime, then you pretty much know what the game is about. If you haven't seen the anime, well, let's just say it's quite difficult to tell you exactly what is going on. Now, going over the game's graphics, I was actually very pleased on how well everything was put together for this title because it follows very closely to its anime, even though there are some portions here and there from the story that are missing, but then again, it's not really going to be bothersome for new players. So not only are the characters captured quite well, but the cinematic cutscenes, the visual standpoints in terms of set locations that you get to visit, some of the base camps that you also get to take part in and kind of explore a little bit and interact with some of the characters within the game, but every nuke and detail was captured very good, especially when you get involved in the combat portions, because that was one of the main concerns that I had. It's like, how are they actually going to capture the show quality of this into a video game format? And I don't know how they did it, but they did it very, very well. Now, there is one minor thing that I did tend to notice in terms of visualization is that there's not as much gore or blood like there is in the actual anime itself. So it's one of the things that I did tend to notice that seemed to be tuned down a little bit. I mean, it is still presented into the game, just not as much as the show. Next up, I want to go ahead and talk about the gameplay, and the best way I could describe the gameplay is very similar to games like Dynasty Warriors. However, the big difference between the two is that this one is a little bit more fast-paced action, and of course, instead of dealing with hundreds of soldiers on screen, you are going to be destroying massive titans, which can be either big, small, or even sometimes armored-based titans as well, and of course some of the ones that have a little bit more intelligence where you have to kind of figure out a more defensive tactic in order to get to their nap. Now, pretty much the gameplay is very simplistic. Again, you are going to be attacking titans throughout your entire experience, and the single player, the online multiplayer, side missions from start to finish, and that's all you are going to be doing. Now, you may say that the game is repetitive, which I can say it is, especially when you're trying to grind out for some of the materials, but again, if you're a big fan of the show, you're going to find it pretty addicting at times, especially when you're playing the online multiplayer. But pretty much starting with the story mode, you're going to be following along very closely from start to finish. After you complete the main story mode, there's actually going to be some additional things that you're able to do as well that's going to prolong your overall experience. Now, by partaking in the story missions, what's going to happen is that the game is going to start off relatively easy, but the more and more that you progress into it is going to slowly ramp up the difficulty level, and of course along the way you'll get a lot of different unlockables. After completing each mission, you have a chance to earn experience for your characters to learn different unique skills, and of course not only that, you're able to level up your factions to earn and basically learn new crafting materials, and of course not only that, you're also able to get materials as well. There's a lot of different rankings to go with. You're going to be ranked from like F, C, A. S is basically the highest rank, and by completing missions where you get an S rank all the way around, you're going to get some of the more higher end crafting materials, which are going to be extremely useful because these are the type of materials that you're going to find yourself grinding for many, many hours. Now, of course, along the way, you're also able to partake in side missions. By completing side missions, you're actually able to unlock additional characters that you could use in the free play mode or the online play. And of course, you could also gather more materials like that, and of course, continue to upgrade your factions and characters as well. Speaking of online play, in terms of online play, you have actually up to 4 players at a time. So if you have a few of your friends that you want to play with or just random players, you could actually partake in some of the more challenging missions, especially when you rank up the difficulty level, because once you do that, it actually becomes really, really intense to the point where you have to be careful in terms of the items that you have, what you're going to be using, how much gas is left in terms of your chambers, and all these other little things that you have to kind of keep track of, and making sure that your supply units are intact and so much more. But it definitely gets crazy on the higher difficulty levels, which is something that I would recommend you getting to sooner or later, because that's going to pretty much help continue the lifespan overall. Now, speaking of gameplay elements, depending on the environment you're in, will affect how you perform. For example, being inside the inner walls and the inner gates, you're actually able to use your omnidirectional gear quite well to navigate through the landscape. However, there are going to be some locations where you're going to be more of a plain open field where you're not able to use your omnidirectional gear quite well. However, there is horseback that you can go on, and of course getting to your destinations from point A to point B. And of course, once you happen to find a Titan, lock on and of course finish them off. Speaking of Titans, there's actually various ways to deal with them. For example, one of the most important things is in regards to materials. If you happen to lock on onto a Titan, you may notice a gold symbol anywhere between their nap, their arms, or even their legs. By basically cutting off that portion of their body, you're able to gain materials at the very end of their mission, because again, materials are very important if you want to help upgrade or craft other materials along the way. And of course, not only that, you'll be able to finish them off by locking onto their nap, and of course providing the finishing blow. And of course, depending on where you are into the game, you may have much more higher challenging Titans which are intelligent to the point where you have to take off their arms before you can get to the nap, because they're going to be using their arms to block that, and thus you have to kind of figure out different tactics to go along with it. Now, another important thing that you have to keep in mind as you're playing the game is to kind of keep a close tab on your character, not only in terms of health, but also the quality of your blade and how much gas you have. There's actually units that are scattered around the actual map itself that will help resupply you. However, if the Titans get to them first and you don't save them in time, you are basically going to lose a lot of resupply units, which you won't be able to utilize, especially if you happen to have a few Titans left and you have no more blades. You're basically pretty much out of luck in regards to that. However, depending on the character you have at the time, some of the characters may have unique abilities. Like for example, Levi, he's actually able to change his blades while you're using omnidirectional gear within the air. And of course, if you happen to be on horseback, you kind of change the gear on the fly. So that's kind of one of the important aspects that you have to keep in mind, is not only do you want to continue to upgrade and craft newer material, but of course you also want to pay attention to what gear you have at the time in terms of your gas usage, and of course how your blades are at the time, because if you don't have a sharpened blade, you're not going to do any damage at all. So there's a lot of elements here and there, and of course a lot of collectibles to deal with, but overall the gameplay is very fun, addictive, but at times extremely repetitive. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the game's sound design, and overall everything within the sound department was also really good in terms of the voice acting, the soundtrack, and of course the sound effects that you hear during in-game in terms of dealing with the Titans, people screaming in the distance of being killed off, and of course let us not forget using the omnidirectional gear to maneuver through the battlefield. However, there is one important detail to keep in mind, that if you are getting this game, there is no options at all to have English voice actors. Everything is going to be said in Japanese with English subtitles, but again, that is the only option that you have with the game. But again, the sound department is fantastic, from music to cinematics and of course to in-game combat. Next up, I want to go ahead and talk about the game's lifespan. After you complete the game, there are still additional activities that you can take part in to try to prolong your overall experience. For example, after you beat the main campaign, there'll be some additional content after that that will kind of enhance the story a little bit more, something that wasn't featured in the anime but may be featured in a season 2 of Attack on Titan. Other tasks that you can do is that sometimes you also receive assignments, and after completing them, they'll add a little bit more to a story element to kind of collide and kind of hang out with the characters a little bit more, to kind of build a little bit more of a bond or a relationship, if you will. You also have side activities that you could take part in, and by completing these side activities, you'll be able to unlock additional unlockables such as character information, graphics art, music, and all these other little things. And of course, not only that, you could also unlock additional characters that could be used in free play mode. Speaking of characters, there are several characters that you can play as in the game, and each of these characters can level up and kind of learn unique skills and abilities. Most of the characters have about the same thing overall, however their stats are a little bit different, so depending on who you pick and choose will determine their overall strengths, leadership, which character could use the most gas or less gas, and just other elements like that. But you are able to level up these characters, and the max level for the game is level 7, so trying to go over every single little character is going to take you a lot of time. And of course, let us not forget the crafting materials. In order to craft newer items, you have to keep ranking up your overall stats, and I don't know what the max is, but right now I'm at like 56 or 57, and there's still things I'm currently unlocking. So again, there's a lot of repetitive gameplay here, but there's a lot of different things that you can do. And of course, let us not forget the online multiplayer, where you could take part in some of the more challenging missions, especially dealing with all those armored Titans. That's definitely going to prolong your experience right there. Now, as for the game's innovation, I don't feel like there's a big innovation for this title because it's very familiar to other titles that I played, and again, it's more or less Dynasty Warriors but with an Attack on Titan theme to it, and not as many soldiers that appear. Now, overall, I really had fun with the title. I feel like I did get my $60 worth. However, if you are not really a big fan of the show or enjoy Dynasty Warrior type of gameplay, then this may be a title that you may not get into or feel like you're going to get your money's worth. Overall, the game was enjoyable. The visual aspects, characters have followed along very strongly. There are some additional things that you can do to prolong your overall experience. However, in terms of any type of errors, there was a minor graphical glitch here and there, but I think with the stability patch, I will fix that. Other than that, the game pretty much ran smooth for the majority of my experience, with only a hiccup here and there. But in the end, I'm actually going to be giving the Attack on Titan on the PlayStation 4 an 8 out of 10. If you're a big fan of the show and like Dynasty Warriors, then you will enjoy this game. If you're not, again, this may be something that you might want to pick up later on, or maybe rent it at a Redbox location. But until then, I am SirJames from Gamerfuzion.com, where we empower your gaming.